Hey everyone, welcome to the E2 Effective Elders podcast. Visit us at e2elders.org and please share this good word with others.
Hey everybody, welcome to the E2 podcast. We are so grateful that you're taking a few moments to either watch and or listen to this conversation that Jim and I will be having on survey results that are pretty important, and they speak volumes into elder ministry. Hey, before we do that, Jim, must be that you and I both got the memo that we're going to
Yes.
wear brown frame glasses and a green shirt today.
Yes. And it's not even St. Patrick's Day. So just
Yes.
for the record.
Yeah. Hey, and also too, before we jump into our conversation, we want to congratulate you on this incredible new venture in your ministry path. You want to share with everybody what's going to be happening soon?
Yes, July 1st of this year, I will join the faculty of Dallas Theological Seminary in Dallas, Texas. I'll be a member of their Educational Ministries and Leadership program, teaching in their master's and doctoral programs. And it's quite a venture to not only move to Texas, but also to be at a seminary of that size and stature. It's a large interdenominational seminary. So I look forward to joining my colleagues. But I also look forward to representing E2 in Texas.
For sure. Yep. Yep. You're going to help us to put a foothold in a part of the country where we are not yet having a foothold.
Yeah, that's my prayer.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. You'll be a great regional representative of E2 for certain. Today, we want to have a conversation about some survey results that came our way. Now, just a little bit of context before we get into the content of the survey. If we think back to pre-COVID, E2 did a survey with what was then the CCL, the Center for Christian Leadership. And that was in 2018. Then the survey took place again post-COVID in the latter part of 2020. And then we ran the survey at the end of 2023, the beginning of 2024.
Correct.
And Jim, being the analytical statistician that he is, crunched the numbers, a lot of them.
Yes.
And he's done all the difficult work for us. And like cream rising in milk, he's going to share with us 8 takeaways from the survey. Now, before we get into those, Jim, why would surveys be important for elders in the first place?
Well, it moves us really from theory to reality. I mean, it's one thing to talk in general, vague ideas and concepts, but when you can go, based on a survey of 400 elders, these were the top issues on their mind. These were as you put it, the cream that wrote, I'm not going to sit here and read every question that was on the survey and go, here was the response to this. Here, rather, you begin to see a pattern form. You begin to get a high resolution picture of reality as elders are facing it today in the church. And because it was great, you mentioned 2018, 2020, 2024, we don't just have 3 snapshots. We can also look for trends. Some things that maybe, hey, we were very stable in this. Other times the trend said, hey, we really lost. Other things were rising. So being able to look at these snapshots and just like an old-fashioned movie, flip through it quickly and see what way the data is going.
Yeah.
It lets us have a good picture, a high resolution picture of what our elders in our church is really dealing with.
Yeah. So over a 6-year period, 2018 to 2024, some trends have been identified. And I really like your statement. We're dealing with reality here.
Yes.
Dealing with reality. All right. So why don't you take it away? What's one of these 8 takeaways from the survey?
This will not be a shocking realization, but the number one finding that came out not only in the numerical data, but also in what we call the qualitative data. That's where interviews, where the data is more verbal instead of numbers, was elders are not fond of meetings. The number one thing that came across, I mean, every time in every survey, 2018, 2020, 2024, we're just not fond of meetings. Why? Because they're too long. Some of them just seem not to have a purpose. They're tired of Zoom meetings where we're not in person. Uh, Following rabbit trails to where we were on this topic and now how did we get into discussing that? Along with that, the frequency of meetings, some elders talked about having meetings every week. And also just distractions. We knew what we were going to try to do, and then something would come up and derail the agenda. But one of the biggest answers was, though, the reason we don't like meetings is there was no follow through. That you had this meeting, you discussed the issue, you made a decision, and a month later you got back together and nothing had been done with it. And so once again, the whole notion of just, meetings not being, just simply not being purposeful and not being effective. I have a mug in my office that actually says, I survived another meeting that should have been an email. That's kind of the impression I got by looking at the data was, if we're going to have a meeting, it has to have a purpose and we have to have follow through, and we need to stick to what the agenda says.
For those who did not see last month's podcast, so we're talking about March of 2024. The podcast March 2024 was on how to have a more effective elders meeting. And we broke that down very simply, ABC of a better meeting. Now, if you go to our website, e2elders.org, under resources, we've got under resources, an elder agenda template, an elder meeting agenda template. So just go there, click on it, and use that, please. Many people have downloaded that. All right.
Absolutely.
What's a second takeaway?
Well, once again, probably no surprise here, but the effects of COVID are very, very evident. The effects of COVID. Some churches were prepared to jump to online because they had already been online. They had already been streaming their service. They already had a web presence, a digital presence. So for them, it was not as great a leap. For others, it was, throwing on the brake and careening up the exit, trying to get to online practices that they were unfamiliar with. One elder probably said it best, we're just simply tired of COVID. But when you looked at the data, picture a pie chart. The 2018, when we asked, what size is your church? The largest segment of churches that responded was 100 to 250. The 2020, after COVID, or we were at the end of it, it was like the dial was grabbed and turned down because the largest group responding said their average attendance was less than 100.
Wow.
Now, in 2024, the percentage went back up to the 100 to 250, but the percentage was not as high as it was in 2018. So basically, picture here was pre-COVID. COVID hit, and the majority of our churches lost. So it's like the dial goes down. Now that COVID is over, we're beginning to regain. We're coming back. We're recovering, but we haven't fully recovered.
Okay.
And not to mention the fact we did learn some fairly important lessons in COVID that perhaps we should not unlearn. Ministers and elders really got creative on how do we continue to do ministry, and came up with elaborate teaching and shepherding ministries. And just because COVID is gone, those ministries are still very viable.
Well, and just if you're watching and or listening, be encouraged. There are pieces of news coming to us that our churches are rebounding. We just are not fully recovered. Okay, number 3 takeaway.
Sure. The longevity of elders. A closer look is this. When we ask questions like what's the age of the elders in your church, the largest group, about a third of the elders, are 60 to 69 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you also ask how many years have you served, well, the most recent study, 25%, which was the largest, percentage,
Mm-hmm.
was 10 to 19 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by the way, that seems to be somewhat consistent. And there seems to be relative stability from 2018, 2020, 2024. The age of elders and the longevity they've served seems to be pretty stable.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say this, there are pros and cons to that. If you have an elder team that simply keeps serving, but without adding new members to it,
Mm-hmm.
you might get stability, but eventually you go, who's going to take our place?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to take our place? If you don't have longevity, then you go, okay, we got people who are getting experience, but they're exiting the role.
Mm-hmm.
They're leaving the function, they're leaving the elder ministry behind before they're really the seasoned veteran.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this did was it reminded us, when I go to a store, I love seeing those expiration dates where they go sell by, use
Yeah.
by, best if used by.
Mm-hmm.
We all have that in our life and in our ministry. There's all that nobody's eternal, as an elder or a minister.
Mm-hmm.
And the simple fact is we're going to have an expiration date.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention that best if used by, there comes a point where I'm just not as effective as I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So the big question is, how are we training up the next generation to take our place?
Yeah. And to that end, our newest book
Right.
is called Operation Pipeline. So again, if you go to e2elders.org, Operation Pipeline, 4 steps to recruit new elders. It's a great practical book. Many churches have already purchased it. They're using it because they want to refill the leadership pipeline at their church. Just like in baseball, somebody is always on deck, ready to bat. And we need to have people on deck ready to serve as elders of the church. Number 4, what's a fourth takeaway?
Well, when you asked elders, what is an elder to do? There seems to be an increased focus on really elders as leaders in the church.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, when asked about things like onboarding, and do elders have job descriptions? And is there evaluation of elders? There was a growing presence of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, each year, 18, 20, 24, a higher percentage was doing that. However, the concern I have is, even though it was a growing number, it was still under 50%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So still the majority of our churches are not, onboarding new elders with a special training program or apparatus to give them. They don't have a job description. So like the elders isn't coming in going, here are the things I do. They're not being evaluated in their role as an elder.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's still the minority doing that, but it is increasing.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you say, so why should why is it important to have those things? Well, from what we just spoke about, we extend our shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
Our best if used by date,
Mm-hmm.
it keeps going forward if we're learning, if we're experiencing, if we're, in other words, as long as we're staying fresh, we're able to stay on the shelf a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
And when they ask, how do you do this training? Well, the vast majority said books.
Mm-hmm.
Books, and then after that, like regional or local conferences, events.
Mm-hmm.
Web and digital resources came in shortly after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then coaching was really by about a third of the churches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Said that by calling in somebody. But I was very happy, and I have a lot of hope in this, because when elder teams were asked, how strongly do you value training? Well, 61% surveyed either said agreed or strongly agreed.
That's great.
So they understood the value of this. They're just in the process of ramping it up.
Yeah, the ship is turning. And
Yes.
last year, 2023, just We had our record historical year on the number of people either downloading free resources from our website and or purchasing our material, our elder training material, both print and digital. So we know that we are making a difference in the equipping of elders for leadership, for actual leadership. What's number five? What's number five?
Well, number five was elders, individually and as a team, seem to feel fulfillment. If this was a job setting, we'd say satisfaction. What's your job satisfaction? But it isn't a job, and so really the idea of fulfillment comes across, and by that on a 10-point scale, in 2018, 2020, and 2024, the average response was a 7. So it's above average. And so they feel a strong sense of fulfillment in what they do as elders. Now, related to that, we ask about the workload, what the church is asking you to do. The number one answer across the board, all 3 surveys, was the workload is just right. Not too strong, not too light. There were a few that said it's a little heavy, particularly during COVID. The number jumped during COVID. It's higher. However, what's ironic is there were several who said, about 20% said, nope, we can actually do more if asked to. So there seemed to be this idea of, I feel fulfilled as an elder. The workload is not too great. It's just right, and I could even do more.
Yeah, great. Very, very good. And I'm in particular interested in number 6.
Yes, improved relations between elders and lead ministers. Now, I have to confess, when I put this up at the Lead Well conference, I had a picture of the University of Kentucky basketball team, which brought, some applause, some jeers. Nonetheless, we're past March Madness, so now we all have the outcome. But basically, the idea that gone are the days of viewing the minister as a hireling, an employee. I remember a joke card being given to me when I was a minister in the hospital, and it said, by a vote of 8 to 11, the board votes that you get well soon. Signed, the chairman. And the simple fact is, I look forward to the day personally when the word, church board and chairman are just kind of, antiques.
Yeah, relegated to history.
Exactly. Because as we look at it in the surveys, the large percentage of people, when asked about their working relationship with the lead minister, described it as excellent. And even though dysfunctional was an option on the survey, nobody chose it.
Wow.
I mean, 400 elders, nobody chose it. And in fact, nobody really said in the 2020 or 2024 surveys that the minister was an employee.
But they did in 2018.
But they did in 2018, a very small percentage, 7%, described him as an employee. So once again, we're beginning to see some movement forward on this notion of that the minister is part of the leadership team.
Yeah, here at the Creek even, where I served for 30 years, and then 5 years ago this month, handed the baton off to my successor, Dan Hamill. So I was invited back to serve as an elder, but now I was asked to serve as the lead elder. And Dan was one of the people who initiated that conversation. So here I am, the former minister, who's the lead elder in a relationship of brotherhood with our lead pastor.
Absolutely.
And it's only possible through the power of the Lord, guided by the truth of His Word. So
absolutely. Well, and the Creek is a very, very unique place where that relationship historically has been strong between the elder team and the lead minister. So absolutely, once again, it would not be a threat. Plus, the manner in which you transitioned, where he came on board, 2 years before you left?
Yeah. We had a 2-year overlap.
Yeah, so it wasn't like two ships passing in the night. You had a chance to build relationship with each other.
Yeah.
And so I think that's great. And by the way, just a little excursus. elders do have to be the ones who call a lead, a
Mhm.
lead minister. And just to note what they were looking for in 2024, number one, personal experience.
Hmm.
Number two, a bachelor's degree. And number three, ordination.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
would say this, in 2018, they never put the option of personal experience.
Really? Wow.
2018, the survey didn't include it. So
Mhm.
this, like I said, the surveys did change a little bit based on what we asked and
Mhm.
feedback to the survey.
Mhm.
But what was ironic is in 2023, when personal experience was not there, having a master's degree popped up on the survey.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it wasn't just having a bachelor's, it was having graduate study as well.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if the fewer number of people available for vocational ministry, as that
Yes.
number decreases, if that's what's fueling that kind of a response educationally. Yep.
Right. Because, because you're going to have people that have a degree in business or teaching or some other field in ministry, but they've been volunteering at the church for 20 years. You can't find somebody to fill the pulpit, so you ask them to step in.
Yep. Mhm.
And hence we have
Mhm.
our preaching elder book.
Right. Exactly. Number 7, what's a takeaway?
Well, the takeaway is when I say the word a relative lack of interest over social issues.
Hmm.
Now, when I bring this up, I don't want to share the full story. It would take a little bit of time.
Mhm.
But, I've seen churches think they're immune to, oh, we don't have to worry about all these social things going on, the gender issues and the LGBTQ and progressive Christianity and all that. And I'm just reminded as a sci-fi fan of Star Wars episode 5, where Skywalker is saying he's not afraid to face Vader, he's not afraid to face his fears, and Yoda just says, "You will be."
Mhm.
There comes a point where you can deny those things are going to actually impact you, but they are.
Yeah, for
And so
sure.
what took me was
Mhm.
in the survey, when I say a relative lack, when we were asked, when it was asked, are you consumed?
Mhm.
Now, keyword there, the word was consumed by these kind of matters in your culture and your society. The average was a 4.2,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
less than half. And
Mhm.
by the way, 20% said they had no need for any additional materials on this.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, that's only 20%, that's 1 out of 5. But when you looked at the data, it was all skewed to the
Mhm.
lower numbers.
Mhm.
It wasn't just one figure, but every figure. And I just got the opinion that, we may not think these issues need to be addressed.
Mhm.
The confusion of the word consumed, maybe
Right.
they are addressing them, but it isn't like consuming them.
Mhm.
But once again, it was just a concern to point out that if churches think they're immune to these things,
Mhm.
then they're not on guard for these things.
Right. Mhm.
If you're not looking for it, you don't see it when it comes in.
Mhm.
And so just keeping the guard up, but also looking for ministry opportunities. You know, if
Man.
we're not,
Mhm.
if we're
Yeah.
not, paying attention to it,
Mhm.
then we don't approach these people with the gospel.
Yep.
We don't share it with them
Right.
because we
Mhm.
don't think they're there.
Mhm. Mhm. And number 8, last of all.
Yes. Just the fact that elders seem to have a much clearer image
Mhm.
of what an elder is supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
They were asked some very open-ended questions like, what do you want to do more of?
Mhm.
What do you want to do less of? And I was really impressed with the answers. When you were asked them, what do you want to do more of in 2024? Here were the top answers: pastoral care, prayer, evangelism,
Mhm.
disciple making, and specifically mentoring people and teaching or leading a small group.
Wow.
That was kind of the methods associated with disciple making.
Mhm.
Also, leadership development
Mhm.
and building relationships, not only among the elder team,
Mhm.
but with the staff and the rest of the congregation.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was really their priorities. And if you said, what were the top 6 things they wanted to do, that
Mhm.
was it. Now, if you said, what do you want to do less of?
Mhm.
Well, about 5 seemed to be echoed throughout the survey. First off is just get away from all the irrelevant, distracting matters.
Mhm.
They were tired of putting out fires. Pointless meetings. We don't have time for this.
Mhm.
Conflict, having to deal with conflict. They were tired of having to deal with interpersonal conflict,
Mhm.
or even just broad-based church conflict.
Mhm.
And by the way, something else that E2 actually stresses, that they did not want to have to handle the finances and the business
Mhm.
of the church. That they were tired of having to deal with budgets and
Mhm.
financial requests and data
Mhm.
sheets.
Mhm.
And then very very revealing to me was the day-to-day managing or micromanaging of the church.
Mhm.
They did not want to have to do that.
Great. Mhm.
They were saying we want to get out of the weeds.
Mhm.
And so that was really the insights that the top insights we got. There were very, very many more, but
Mhm.
those were the ones that you put at the cream came to the top. These were the ones that
Mhm.
resonated throughout the survey.
Yeah, and for us, how that survey helps
Yes,
E2 is to know that what we design, what we offer, it's making a difference
it
after
is.
6 years. And again, we existed prior to that, but we're picking up momentum, and
It takes time.
it takes time. The ministry is becoming a movement,
Right.
and the survey helps to encourage us with reality. Just
Mhm.
as you said at the beginning of our conversation, a survey identifies reality. And
And it
this,
does help us project forward and say, where do we need to spend our efforts?
yeah, great. All right, buddy. Well, we sure do appreciate you crunching the numbers.
Enjoyed it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it because that does not breathe life into me. So it's all good. And everybody, if we can help you with any of this information, you be sure to email us at jim@e2elders.org or gary@e2elders.org. We'd be happy to help you in whatever way that we can. Hey, Jim, blessings to you and Karen as you pack up that moving van and you're
Absolutely.
on your way down south. And we look forward to how Jesus is going to work through you at Dallas Theological Seminary and beyond. We're so
But
grateful for
if
you.
anybody here is in Texas, look me up.
Will do. All
All
right.
right.
Bye-bye.